Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. When comes the time to write the history of Arkansas in the pandemic, or the first one of the 21st century, a principal question will be how high or whether we had our guard up. Plainly, we're letting it down. And the clinical community is warning that COVID fatigue, the arrival of effective vaccines, lingering suspicions about medicine or government or both, whatever the factors, alone or in concert, Arkansas is at risk of additional and unnecessary illness and death. In its latest report on the coronavirus in our state, the team at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences warns that the worst may in fact not be behind us. Despite the almost universal availability of vaccination and testing rates in Arkansas are far below what the experts consider acceptable. And if the case rate for the moment seems stable, there are some other alarming numbers to consider. The UAMS Chancellor, Dr. Patterson, joins us now. Doctor, if I could, thank you first of all for being with us and making time for us again. I'd like to begin with a quote from the report. COVID-19 is not over in Arkansas. It is, at best, smoldering. How close to a fire?
Well, we don't know yet, Steve. We're seeing some signs that are concerning. We certainly are not right now in the heat of the fire in the way that we were over the winter when we had thousands of new cases reported a day, when we had close to 400 patients in intensive care unit settings across the state. But you would anticipate that if we were doing all the right things and that the vaccine was accepted and working, that our trajectory would be downward. And unfortunately, at least among the sickest patients, the trajectory is back upwards. We had 35 patients across the state who needed intensive care unit care 2 months ago. That number has more than doubled up to 75 patients across the state requiring intensive care unit care here in Arkansas, and we're seeing the same thing here at UAMS.
Well, using the smoldering scenario, let's look at the kindling or the embers, if you will. Is there a single statistic or a pair or a set of statistics from where we are right now that you consider most alarming?
I would say right now the two trends that are concerning me the most are that the number of patients who are in our ICUs who are requiring heart-lung bypass, we call it ECMO, who are requiring mechanical ventilation, those numbers are going up. But the other alarming feature that I'm very concerned about is that we're seeing the sickest patients are not necessarily the oldest patients. When the pandemic started, the patients that we saw in our ICUs were over the age of 65, over the age of 70. We're now seeing young adults who are sick and on death's door. And those twin trends are the ones that most alarm me right now.
Why are they sicker, Dr. Patterson? Is this virus shape-shifting here? Are we seeing variants?
So the variants are clearly a part of this. The variant that we now have in the state that is causing the most illness, making individuals more acutely ill, is the Delta variant is here. And if it becomes the most common form of COVID-19 that transmits in the state, that's going to be a big concern. I also think that part of the trend in the downward trajectory from an age standpoint may be because the older age group has been more accepting of getting vaccine, and we may see some subtle signs of community-wide vaccine efficacy in older age groups, but in younger age groups, young adults who may be more hesitant to get vaccinated, they may become the ones who are now the most vulnerable to infection.
Well, and of course the bulletproof syndrome sort of, or mindset anyway, presents itself in that age group. But young or old, the vaccination rate in the state is far, far smaller, lower than what you and your colleagues want. What can be done? What's at work here?
Well, it is far lower. You know, we need 70, 80%, maybe even more of our population vaccinated in order to get to that herd immunity that really diminishes community transmission. And right now, only about 30% of our total population has been vaccinated. We need to do a better job of educating. We need to explain to people that the science can be trusted in ways that the internet maybe can't be trusted. That the things that you hear on the news or from a friend may not be exactly the truth. But I think people also need to understand the consequences of not getting vaccinated. You know, we've had at UAMS over the past 2 months 4 patients who required heart-lung bypass to stay alive because of COVID-19 infection. 3 of those individuals were of childbearing age. Actually, three of the individuals were pregnant. So, you know, there is nobody is bulletproof when it comes to COVID-19.
You have talked in the report of a, quote, relaxed attitude and more wishful thinking. Clearly, there is a fatigue factor in here. People who have been conscientious are now discarding their masks. They may not be washing their hands and socially distancing as they were certainly a year ago. How do you combat that?
I think you combat it by saying that, hey, look, if you are vaccinated, you can go outside without a mask. If you are vaccinated, you can attend indoor events. If you are vaccinated, you don't have to worry about who you are around. Keep in mind here, you know, the people who have been admitted to the hospital with COVID-19 have one thing in common. None of them have been vaccinated. So the vaccination will protect you, but it will also allow you to live a better lifestyle. If you've not been vaccinated, you should be, and you're supposed to be, wearing a mask outside based on CDC guidelines. You're supposed to avoid situations in which you cannot socially distance. So following the guidelines, getting the vaccine will help you, it will help your family, it will help your community, and it will help our economy unwind from some of the difficulties that we've been experiencing with COVID-19.
Can we report any progress at all? The rate of immunization, vaccination among communities of color in Arkansas was lagging. Can we report any progress on that front?
We are making progress, and you know, the equity in terms of vaccine distribution has been very important to us at UAMS. I know it's something that the governor has focused on. Specific outreach to communities of color is making a difference. We want people to feel that they can trust what we say and that the vaccine is safe. I think our biggest concern right now is the struggle that we are facing in rural communities. And there's definitely a disparity in our ability to reach individuals in rural communities. We need to double down on that. That's on us, and it's on getting the message out.
And targeting younger Arkansans now with the vaccination.
Absolutely. You know, if you are 12 or above, you're eligible to get the vaccine. It's been shown to be safe and highly effective in those patient populations. And, you know, there's no room for concern. There's no reason to defer or delay. You're only putting yourself at risk. You're only putting your friends and family at risk.
Yeah, but what is your sense, Doctor? We've got summer has just begun, but the mid-August will soon be here. Colleges, universities, and K-12 public schools. What do the current set of statistics? What do they suggest? What do they portend for the resumption of classes?
Well, you know, there are 2 inflection points that I'm focusing on. One are the holidays, and we don't yet know what the impact of the Memorial Day weekend is on COVID-19 infections in this state. It takes about 2 weeks for us to get a sense of what those impacts are. And we have 4th of July holiday coming up as well. So, you know, we'll need to keep a close eye on whether we see upticks around those two holidays. But then, you mentioned the fall coming up, and two things that happen. People go back to school, but also with cooler weather, it's easier for respiratory infections like COVID-19 to be transmitted. So those are going to be serious inflection points that we need to pay attention to. And if we are trending upward, Steve, as we get into late August, early September, I think we're going to need to be concerned that, we may see, another big wave of COVID-19 in our state unless we can get our vaccination rates higher.
Well, on this program, Doctor, several months ago, you and a couple of colleagues were cautioning the state that it was literally on the knife's edge in terms of COVID. Have we moved measurably away from the edge?
We have, and at that moment when we were on the precipice, I think our state leaders did the right thing. People in our state paid attention, and we pulled back from there. We are not on fire in the way that we were in January, February, but we are not going in the right direction right now, and we could be on fire again in the August or September timeframe if we don't get our current situation at a more stable place with regard to transmission of COVID-19. I think if we pretend right now like the problem is behind us, that's the worst thing that we can do.
And Dr. Patterson, we'll end it there, and thank you for, once again, making yourself available.
Thank you, Steve.
Come back soon. Born in the 19th century, it survived into the 20th, and by that name, or perhaps others, into the 21st, or at least its philosophy does. The Ku Klux Klan, the movement and the mindset behind it, the subject of a new work of scholarship by a veteran scholar of Arkansas history, Dr. Kenneth Barnes, now freshly retired from the University of Central Arkansas. The Ku Klux Klan in 1920s Arkansas, how Protestant white nationalism came to rule a state. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Again, I should say, because you've been on our air before. And as always, full disclosure, yes, the author and your moderator are first cousins. Anyway, thanks for coming in. What brought this book about?
Well, I had written another book that came out a few years back about anti-Catholicism in Arkansas, and that book really spanned the 20th century, at least up to the Kennedy election in 1960. But the 1920s phase of that book, the subject really was subsumed into activity of the Ku Klux Klan. So I'd done a fair amount of work about the Klan in the 1920s in relationship to anti-Catholicism, and it just seemed like a good follow-up to, since I had a lot of material that nobody had uncovered before, that I go ahead and just write the history of the 1920s Klan in Arkansas.
There is a certain personal aspect to this which you acknowledge in the preface.
Yes. That's true. I was interested in the Klan and actually anti-Catholicism for that matter for personal reasons. And one of those is that I'd always grown up hearing the story from my mother that her father had been a member of the Klan. In fact, she said that when she was a little girl, this would have been probably in the mid to late 1920s, she found his Klan robe at home and asked him what it was, and he explained that it was an organization that just did good things in the community. So I had grown up knowing about the Klan and about my personal connection to the Klan. I could say this is my mother's father, so not the side of the family, not the Barnes side of the family that Steve shares here.
As you document, there were Klan chapters all over the state.
For sure. It was pervasive in Arkansas, and that's one of the surprising things that I found. Nobody had really looked at the Klan on a statewide level in Arkansas, and I'd read a lot of newspapers, small town newspapers and Klan newspapers, national Klan newspapers, and just basically cataloged information that came from different locations in Arkansas and found that there were at least 152 chapters of the Klan in Arkansas. And so think about that, there are 75 counties. That means that there'd be on average a couple of clans per county. Some of them had as many as 5 or 6. There were a couple of counties that I found no Klan in, but there were just plenty of them around. Almost every little town, certainly almost every county seat had a Klan chapter.
And as unbelievable as it may seem today, it was by no means back then a badge of shame.
Oh, not at all. In fact, people, it was a secret society, so they couldn't talk about a lot of things with the Klan. They couldn't divulge membership in the Klan unless you were a like designated lecturer for the Klan, or if you were running for political office, sometimes people would reveal their Klan membership to get votes. But generally, there was a secretive element to it, but it had a very public nature as well. There would be parades, public lectures, activities that people were invited to bring the wife and the kids to participate in. It was really a very kind of public event throughout the state.
And what did your research demonstrate, anyway, about the origins of or its first appearance, significant appearance in Arkansas?
The 1920s Klan arrived in Arkansas in 1921 when some recruiters came to Little Rock from Texas to recruit people to establish chapters. And the first chapter was organized in Little Rock, and it became the Little Rock Klan number 1. They numbered them consecutively from the time of their organization, and that's why I know there were at least 152, because I had found the Klan number 152 in Locksburg, Arkansas. But they arrived in 1921, organized the Little Rock Klan, and basically just rode the rails between Texarkana and Little Rock, between Little Rock and Fort Smith, and you can see Klan chapters popping up in Conway, Morrilton, Clarksville, Ozark, Fort Smith, and then the same way towards Texarkana, and just spread out really from there.
And into the Delta as well, of course.
Certainly, yeah.
Statewide.
Yeah. Statewide, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
What was it the 20s that marked the apex of Klan activity?
Yeah, so 1920s Klan was very much a well-organized corporation, really, that had its headquarters in Atlanta. It was a huge money-making machine for the people that ran the Klan. And so it was sort of like a pyramid scheme from top down, very well organized, almost like a military hierarchy. So it was very much an organized system, unlike the Klan of more recent years, which is decentralized. In fact, there's not really just one Klan. There are many different groups that kind of carry on a Klan tradition in the civil rights era to the present. But this one of the 1920s was a big business and really like a fraternal men's organization like the Masons or the Elks or the Oddfellows or something like that had quite a structure with it.
Yeah, if it was not necessarily a ticket to business success or commercial success in the state, it certainly wasn't an obstacle either.
Oh, for sure. In fact, it might even be, I'm sure some people joined the Klan because it put them into contact with the leading citizens of their communities. The Klan of the 1920s tried to recruit the respectable sort of country club set or Chamber of Commerce types, or like could be the Rotary Club of the 1920s.
And had some success at it.
Yeah, and not the sort of blue-collar members. I've done some statistical analysis of Klan membership for 2 Klans, Bentonville and Monticello, where membership lists have survived, and it's very easy to identify that it's not common laborers that were members so much as it was merchants, lawyers, professional people, clergy, actually people like me, college professors, teachers, would be the typical Klan members, and prosperous farmers.
Yeah. What was this? What consumed the Klan? Or was there any one thing? Was it white superiority? Was it political power? Was it commercial power? What was the scope of the?
All of the above. It was a very diverse organization in terms of what it stood for. And we commonly today think immediately of race when we hear about the Klan, and certainly that was a part of it. In the creed of the Klan, in their oath that they would take when they became a member, they had to profess their attachment to white supremacy. But in terms of the actions and actually the rhetoric of the Klan, they spent more time talking about immigration, trying to keep Southern and Eastern Europeans out of the United States and trying to promote immigration reform to be a mechanism to do that. They were very, very anti-Catholic. I think they probably spilt more ink railing against Catholics than they did against African Americans. They were also, one of the big causes was just sort of a public morality issue. At least in a public way, they went up against liquor, bootlegging, moonshining. Of course, this is the heyday of Prohibition. And so speakeasies, gambling establishments, brothels, things like that were certainly targets that you could put a target on your back if you were involved in those kinds of activities.
To what extent was the threat to, quote, the threat to white womanhood a part of the sales pitch of the Klan, as it was so much?
They certainly professed that they would go after men who were involved in adulterous relationships, or if people crossed the color line in a relationship, they would definitely go after the man, but sometimes the woman as well. So that was definitely part of the rhetoric, that they were protecting women against possible vices that could come from immoral men and others.
Or from a threat of black men.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Did the Klan, after the 20s, what happened to the Klan?
Well, the Klan...
That was its peak, right?
Yeah, in Arkansas and nationally, it rose very fast, like a bubble, but it also just deflated like a bubble burst about mid-1920s. It continued on technically into the late 20s and 1930s, but just in a fraction of the membership that it had in its heyday, which would be between 1922 and 1925. But it had a whole combination of different factors led to the demise of the Klan. I'd say largely it was a number of scandals that were played out in law courts and the newspapers that aired the dirty laundry of some of the prominent Klan leaders who didn't really walk the walk that they talked. And that obviously was a publicity meltdown really for an organization that professed to hold higher standards than the typical folks in the public.
These scandals tended to be financial. Or
financial, sexual,
yeah.
Public drunkenness. Pretty much you could run the gamut of things that they would be embarrassed for it to be revealed, in the media.
Yeah, the violence that is so often, and not improperly, attributed to the Klan was this, especially in other states. Was the Arkansas Klan or the Klan in Arkansas, was it different, say, from the Klan in that respect from Alabama, Mississippi, other parts of the Deep South? Yeah,
the literature on the Klan has, in more recent years, tend to emphasize the Klan, the lack of violence, or that there wasn't so much a violent organization. And I think part of that is that a good number of the really good pieces of scholarship have come in writing about states outside the South, like Indiana or Oregon, right, where the Klan was more like just a men's club. But the literature about the Klan in the southern states has suggested there was this undercurrent of violence, at least the threat of violence that was always there. And what I found out with Arkansas, looking at Arkansas, was it was very much like that on the southern model, that it engaged periodically in violent activity. And it was moreover that there was the threat. People thought that if they stepped across a line, that the Klan might be showing up at their home in the middle of the night and take them out for a beating, tarring and feathering, or other kinds of things that happened.
We were then different, I guess, from, say, Alabama, Mississippi, during movement days of the 60s and 70s anyway.
Yeah, the 60s and 70s, yes, maybe so, but my research was on the 20s, and I would say it was pretty similar to Alabama and Mississippi, except perhaps the Klan was even stronger and better organized in Arkansas in the 1920s than it was in those other southern states.
What is is there a message in the book for today?
Well, I think there is, and certainly as I was writing the book, events that were happening in the world I live in were always in the backdrop as I was writing. I had finished writing the book before the events of the presidential election of last fall, and then January 6th that followed. But very clearly, I would suggest that some of the language and sentiments and ideology, really, that the Klan made as a public movement in the 1920s has been consistently there in the years since the 1920s, just sort of migrating from one place to another, one constituency in the American political system to another. But certainly, I think we've seen it show its face since 2016 in a very public way. Some of the utterances that have been said on the political arena could have been straight out of my book. I mean, the same exact phrases. Sometimes the the particular group that's being targeted might be different. Instead of Catholics, maybe it's Muslims. Instead of Catholic immigrants from Italy, maybe it's Mexicans that have been targeted. But much of the thinking has been fairly consistent and flourished, obviously in the last several years.
Dr. Ken Barnes, thanks very much. The book, The Ku Klux Klan in 1920s Arkansas. Come back.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.